Imperial Oil committing to growth with the anticipation that energy demand will not slow down, saying demand will rise 20% by 2040, despite the challenges that it's facing the oil industry. For a look at this and some other key issues he's addressing in his final days as chairman and CEO of Imperial Oil, we're joined now by Rich Kruger. Great to have you here.
Thank you. It's good to be here, Greg.
So you had your day today, and your message was that there will still be a demand for the core product of what your company does for at least 20 years. Obviously, outside of the oil industry, that is not an opinion that's shared by some.
Well, as we look at global trends, we look at population growth, living standards. There's a strong correlation with energy. And as the world's population grows, they will need more and more energy. Our view is oil and gas will continue to play a material role in it. And to do that, we need to be safe, affordable, reliable, responsible. And with that in mind, we think we will have a future for decades to come.
That becomes the real key, right? We know that, modern society consumes massive amounts of energy, and we know that's not going to go away. And the debate becomes, what is the source of the energy? There are some people who think that you can turn the taps off overnight. Where would the replacement, I guess, be? If someone got their wish, if the people who want to see the oil and gas industry shut off overnight, where would be the alternative for all the energy?
Well, I think it's interesting to note the world first started using oil in the 1870s. It took literally 100 years before oil was the largest source of energy in the world, replacing coal. So the energy system is vast, it's complex, and it takes time for transitions. So projecting into the future, what exactly will replace it? Right now, oil, anything that moves on the transportation sector is typically run by liquid hydrocarbons. So technologies will inevitably be developed, but in the meantime, continuing to produce oil that has a lower carbon intensity and fits more with the aspirations of the world, we think is the winning formula.
How do you get there then? How do you get there in the oil sands and bring down, because that's the big concern, right? People are concerned about the carbon footprint. Obviously, it's not the easiest oil to get out of the ground.
Well, the Canadian industry has an incredible history. When we first started in the 60s and 70s, we were among the most carbon-intense barrels in the world. Now, newer developments like our Kearl, the largest capital investment in our history, literally has a carbon footprint the same as the average barrel refined in North America today. And when you get there through technology and innovation, finding ways to continue to improve not only how hydrocarbons are produced, but how they're consumed. And we think that that's the advantage that companies like ours, Imperial, but also the Canadian industry has. When you look around the globe, 10 countries hold more than 80% of the remaining oil in the world. Canada's number 3 on that. 5 are Middle East, and then 3 others. We think 4 others. Then we think our continued focus on science and technology is the winning formula for Canada.
Now, the technology for moving our product out to the world is fairly simple. You either put it on a train car or you put it through a pipeline. But that hasn't been simple in this country for quite a number of years now. What's going to be the breakthrough? What's going to get us past this moment that we're at? That's clearly it's bringing divides between the East and the West. It's bringing distrust among politicians. What's the solution here?
Well, you're exactly right. When any industry that produces a commodity sells it at a discount, that presents a competitive disadvantage, and that's exactly what we've had. Our view on this thing is continued education and engagement. It's not to simply say that you can't live without us, but to help society understand how can you live with us? What are we doing to address concerns of society, whether that's carbon emissions or in the oil sands, whether that's water use or land use? How can we be collaborative, achieve mutual objectives? And in this particular case, for this industry, this is a major opportunity, not only for the West, but for Canada overall. Our suppliers come from across the nation. There's an economic opportunity that we think is being untapped across Canada.
The Trans Mountain Expansion Project. How hopeful are you now that it's actually going to get done? I mean, the federal government stepped in, they bought it. We're hearing that people are getting hired to do it, but still there is this mistrust that it's simply not going to happen.
Well, I think the industry has largely gotten to the point where we'll believe it when we see it. And whether that's expansions of existing pipeline systems or new pipelines like Trans Mountain, the federal government has been clear and consistent in its support for it. Certainly the industry is looking for it. We need expanded access. And if you ask me to bet on exactly when, I'm not quite as confident, but the federal government has been very, very consistent in its support for it. And I can assure you the industry is very, very supportive of the Trans Mountain pipeline.
I guess when a lot of people take a look at the situation, and the Trudeau Liberals in particular, yes, they bought the pipeline. Yes, they say they want to get it done, but they also bought in a new regulatory process for energy projects. Obviously, the tanker ban, which is a separate issue on the coast. It feels, I guess, to a lot of people like we have a government saying one thing on one side about the energy industry and then one thing on the other side.
Well, make no mistake about it. When you look at the Canadian industry, the competitiveness challenges we face, I would say, are threefold. It's limitations on market access. And from an investment community, those looking at, from the outside looking in, the regulatory uncertainty we have, the time frames it takes, the cost, and when you get approvals, are they enforceable? Do they allow you to advance projects? And we have an issue with that across our country. You're probably referring to Bill C-69 and things. Our view is that's added more uncertainty to it. So it hasn't helped. The third area is you've got to be competitive for capital. You have to have a fiscal competitiveness when you look at all the taxes, royalties, and things. And does that provide the necessary risk-reward balance? And I would say as Canadian energy sector, we have opportunities to improve in all three of those areas.
Are you hoping in a minority government situation when they reconvene in December that some of the issues of the energy industry might be heard a little more forcefully in Ottawa? I mean, the Liberals have to tread carefully now. They have to go issue by issue, vote by vote to survive.
Well, you know, a company like ours, we've been around 139 years. We've seen a wide range of governments and trends. But I think the important thing is that when Canadians nationwide can understand the importance of this industry, the value it can add, and it's not an East or a West issue, but it's a Canada issue, then I think what we hope is that the politicians, whatever side of the aisle are on, will understand and find out how can we support this industry so that to the benefit of all Canadians.
Interesting headline today. Repsol is looking for new sources of heavy crude, and they're looking toward Alberta. But again, I guess the same issue comes up. And this is for their European businesses. How do we get our product to Europe?
Yeah, well, right now, the vast majority of Canadian production flows to the U.S. It's the largest demand center in the world. It has facilities that have been designed for Canadian heavy oil. But like any business, the more you can diversify your customer slate, whether that's east, west, north, or south, the better off you are. So we happen to sell the vast majority of our oil to the U.S., but we've also sent oil off of the West Coast that's ended up in a variety of Asian nations.
I imagine you spent your weekend reading through the Aramco IPO. I think it's 658 pages. I got to admit I didn't, but I did catch some of the headlines. And one of the interesting ones was if they had a third party to say, you know, what would be the risk here for the oil industry? They said, well, you know, the risk would be we hit peak demand 20 years from now. What do you think about that assessment?
We look at a wide variety of assessments and demand when we make our investment decisions. And despite a wide range of long-term outcomes, they all point to the same thing, that with a depletable resource, which oil and gas naturally depletes, that there'll be material new investment required for decades to come to meet global demand, whatever the absolute level of demand happens to be.
Thanks for joining us. Great to get your insights.
Thanks, Greg.
That was Rich Kruger, the Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of Imperial Oil, and you're going to be retiring from the helm at the end of the year. So it's great to have you here, and you know, you're welcome back anytime.
Appreciate it, Greg. Thank you very much.
Hope to see you soon.